Hello. So in this video, we are going to be covering gap year. In my experience, what were the pros and cons about it, how they turn out. Hopefully I can give you some insights on this if you have a question regarding this. What is a gap year? Why would someone consider it? Taking a gap year can happen at any year of your educational path, but the notion has become a rather popular choice for graduating seniors from high school. So you can take a gap year theoretically at any point in your educational path. You could do it as a high school student, your second year, your first year, your third year, freshman, sophomore. Most of the times, though, when we're talking about gap year, it's usually seniors who just received their college acceptances. And instead of going directly into college the following fall, they decide to take a year off. And that's what we can kind of focus on for today's video. Taking a gap year ranges in reasons or need for each individual and can include the following. It's not limited to this, but these are the main 5 reasons or so that I think I can categorize it under. First is family issues. Maybe you're caring for a seriously ill family member, or you're helping a family through your parents' divorce and you have a little sibling that you want to care for, etc. It could be an academic strategy to reapply or to transfer, perhaps. Maybe you want to boost your GPA. Maybe you realize, you know what, I'd rather go take a gap year and then try reapplying with taking online courses to boost my GPA or to do internships in the meanwhile to develop my activities. Third reason usually is personal time. It's to travel, to explore, to start your TikTok account and your Instagram account and your fame. I'm joking, but honestly, some students kind of have this notion that they could just suddenly take a gap year, and I think this is one of the naive reasons. Number 4, financial considerations. This is really about students that maybe the family has come under really hard times, and as a result, they are struggling or very kind of uncomfortable with a certain agreed amount of tuition that they were offered through their financial aid offering. I've seen these kinds of situations before. Usually, though, when it comes to that, you could work with the financial aid office, figure out a plan and get something worked out. There's usually recourse if it's a financially legitimate reason, but I've seen students be able to kind of point to this as well. And then the 5th reason I've seen is the structured, or what I consider in my mind to be more of like the sabbatical reason, where you are getting the approval of your accepted university to then spend a year doing something more hands-on, something more research-oriented, world travel and mentorship related. An example of that, actually, I have it in the next slide. Note about structured gap years. So that's what they call them. Universities like Princeton offers what they coined the Bridge Year Structured Gap Year Plan, through which incoming freshmen can choose to travel, learn, and volunteer. If you're interested in what a structured gap year looks like, first understand that not every college offers this. Man, I wouldn't even go as far as to wager how many percent I think of colleges in the top 50 offer it. I think it's more on the rarer side. But yeah, Princeton, if you're interested, you can kind of see what that's about. You could check out that link, Bridge Year, Princeton. The Novogratz Bridge Year program allows incoming students to begin their Princeton experience engaged in 9 months of tuition-free, that's really key, that's cool, university-sponsored global service learning. So essentially, they're giving you a free year to just travel the world and learn in a very liberal, holistic, boots on the ground kind of way. Launched in 2009, Bridge Year has provided transformative community-based service learning experiences to over 340 incoming Princeton undergrads. Man, since 2009, it's only 340. I don't want to do the math in my head live on the spot while I'm recording, but that's not a lot of students, if you'd wager, right? Over 20 years, that's like less than 20 students per year, give or take. I would argue since 2017, the data has spiked and more students. In some schools, I've seen like 20%. In some measures, 20% or so of students for that year opted for a gap year. So with COVID coming around, I think that number has only increased. But I'm gonna have to collect data more on that before I give my thoughts and put it out here. The program is open to all members of Princeton's newly admitted first-year class. So these are specifically freshman gap year programs that the schools offer. Do all universities offer gap year? Most universities, so this is not, do they offer a gap structured program like Princeton where it's all expenses paid for you to travel the world and volunteer and experience cultures? This is just the simple question, can I take a gap year? Say I got into UCLA, say I got into USC, say I got into Texas A&M. Do all universities allow you to just take a gap year? Well, the answer to that is most universities will require you to apply for a gap year request. The request process usually entails a written request. Sometimes they'll ask for documentation that's needed to prove your reasoning, your need to take a gap year. Some of them are going to be more lenient. Other of them are going to be much more strict. It all ranges and depends. Not all requests are granted. So that's a key point. You can't just say, oh, I'm going to take a gap year, request, and assume you'll get it. Sometimes you could get rejected. And as a result of that, if you plan around a guaranteed gap year plan, you might want to double check that and be careful. What are the pros? So let's say you wanted to do it, you could do it. Why would you want to do it? I think it's not about you choosing an option like, should I do this or should I not? I think the way you approach gap years, at least with my students, has been there needs to be a very alarming reason why. Okay, so that kind of eliminates the third bullet point on this, which is personal time. But the first reason is family. Just as I mentioned before, the reasons why you would want to go to take a gap year comes down to family. Maybe you have an academic strategy. Maybe you have a financial problem. Maybe you are accepted to a program like Princeton where you want to take advantage of a structured gap year. The only thing on here that I think is problematic that can lead to some issues is the reason for that you just want to take personal time off. There usually has to be a need for it, and that need becomes obviously your pro. You get to handle that need. You get 1 year to kind of manage your family's finances or help your siblings settle down after through your parents' divorce, et cetera, et cetera. The thing that I want to point out for the pros here, besides obviously giving you what you need, the extra year to handle your stuff, is the AGA research found that 90% of students who take a structured gap year return to school within a year and are more likely to graduate on time and with a higher grade point average. Wouldn't you think of that, huh? Spending 1 more year for your young brain to develop, probably if you spent it in a good way, to mature yourself, maybe get even a part-time job in retail to see how hard it is to earn a buck. I think sometimes it gives a lot of students this type of clarity that a lot of parents who often are overly committed or invested in just academic performance may not value. It could also honestly be a mental reset for some students. So the personal time, I get it. I get sometimes students are just having a mental breakdown. They need the year off. But and I fully acknowledge that could be a huge benefit for you, that you could be one of those 90% of students when you come back. I'm just kind of cautioning you that when you try to request time off and it's just for personal time, unless there's a structured plan and you're being very clear about kind of the issues, just personal time off is usually not going to fly. The second pro that I looked up was that according to a study of GPA results by Robert Claggett, the former dean of admissions at Middlebury College. Middlebury is like a top 20 liberal arts school, top 10 actually. It's a really good liberal arts school. Gap year students tend to outperform in college by 0.1 to 0.4 on a 4.0 scale. So let's say that's a 3.6, right? In the best scenario, you would get a 3.6 if you just went straight to. But if you took a gap year, you can improve all the way up into being a 4.0 student. A 3.6 college GPA versus a 4.0 college GPA is significant. It can be the difference between whether you get into your dream medical school or not. Absolutely. Right. So the pros of the gap year also extends into whether you're thinking about the 10-year plan. Whether you're thinking not just about college and graduating and getting a job, but also maybe going to college and then later on going to graduate school, in which case your undergraduate, your college performance is going to matter. And here you have the dean of admissions at Middlebury looking at their data saying, hey, our kids who took a gap year and came to our school usually have a 0.1 to 0.4 higher average GPA. That could be the difference maker if you're planning on going to law school, business school, medical school, etc. So, yeah. What are the cons? The cons of taking a gap year will hold you accountable for following through with the reasons you were granted for that year. So if you requested, hey, I wanted a gap year, and they approved it because of the fact that you were taking care of family, or that you had this research internship opportunity that was a 1-year opportunity and a once in a lifetime thing you wanted to do, but that didn't fall through, that didn't occur, that didn't happen, then they have grounds to not accept you back, which would be a big feels bad. Second con, a higher standard may be placed on how you spent the year. Absolutely. If it's not some sort of dire family issue, hardship issue, kind of that, if you're saying that you have this opportunity, they're gonna scrutinize that opportunity, that internship. They're gonna make sure that it's worth taking a years off of college courses and college experiences. So you're putting more of a magnifying lens on yourself. I think is what I'm trying to say for that year. You'll start a year behind. That's obvious, but it can have that social or psychological impact. It's kind of a cascading delay of your educational plans as well. You could be 1 year delayed in terms of your intent to go to grad school thereafter, etc. The momentum can be lost, right? This is kind of like a basketball heat check kind of thing. And whether you believe it in or not, I tend to see this happening depending on the student's personality, student's makeup. But especially without a well-structured plan, you can lose your momentum as a student, and it could lead to more negative effects in terms of your motivation or your academic performance. That one's a little bit more harder to predict. But yeah, the last con that I had listed here is the cost of taking a gap year. If you think about it, you're not trying to graduate college in 4 years now. You decide to pick one more year up. That's 1 more year of having to feed yourself, house yourself, travel, etc. And so that's basically increasing your tuition around 25% or more in terms of total cost of graduating from a university or achieving a bachelor's degree. So those would be the cons. I think my thoughts on taking a gap year, my experience, reasons I've advised students to take a gap year. Frankly speaking, I think my most common scenario is when a parent, usually it's a parent, is not happy so much with the results. Student agrees, and they decide they want to take a gap year to maybe refill with courses, community college, maybe things like that. That becomes more of a question of the community college transfer and transfer planning rather than a gap year. Why is the gap year coming up here? Because let's say they got accepted to a school like, let's say UIUC, but they were aiming for MIT or Caltech. Okay, so UIUC is still a great engineering school. Just the expectations of the students and family, parents are higher. So what they'll do is they'll take the acceptance to UIUC in hopes of holding on to that, requesting a gap year. Okay, they'll hold on to that, and then they would on the side try to reapply. Either try to transfer or try to apply again as a freshman. There's a lot of procedural like do's and don'ts in that. I'm generalizing here. Some schools, when you request a gap year, will explicitly forbid you from doing anything that allows you to kind of play monkey where you're grabbing another branch, like you're trying to transfer or do some other option. So be advised of that. But yeah, I do work with my experience mostly has been students that have been unsuccessful in terms of their academic expectations. And so they're trying to figure out a plan that way. I do often run into financial family hardships. That's a no-brainer. I think that doesn't require so much thought. You just got to make sure that it's worth, you spend the year trying to make it worth the amount, as I mentioned prior. A couple of students will do structured gap year programs. To my knowledge, my memory so far, last couple of years, has really only been Princeton. I'm sure there's a couple other colleges that I'm forgetting, but Princeton's the only one that comes to mind right now when I think about the ones that have structured gap years. And last bullet there, I would only advise taking a gap year if I can assess and be confident in the student's maturity and planning. So when a student comes to me and say, hey, I want to take a gap year, and if it's not any of the obvious ones like hardships, I'm going to ask him what's his plan. I'm going to ask him, is he committed to this? Because it's kind of scary. A gap year essentially is there's no bumper rails. If things go flat and you get demotivated or something goes wrong and you can't get your plans through, then that's a year that essentially gets wasted. So there's a lot of risk to this that you try to mitigate as much as you can by planning and making sure that you speak with someone who has experience and can advise you on how to do this well. Reasons I've advised against taking a gap year, tons, lots. Just taking a gap year for personal time where they don't have a plan, where they don't have a good excuse, a reason. Usually that's a recipe for risk error. I usually don't advise that. I ask them to bite the bullet and just do the first year of freshman year. If they want to take a gap year after that, they could go for that. And academic history or behavioral patterns that raise concerns regarding the student's commitment and follow through. As I mentioned before, I am assessing the student when a student comes to me asking about gap year options. There are some students where I just genuinely don't think it's a good idea. I think they need the bumper rails of a freshman year experience, the curriculum, the counseling, advising that's going to be there, the extracurricular activities on campus that'll be there. So yeah, I hope that this was helpful. I'm going to continue going on with my essay review series for my juniors. But for my seniors or anyone else who is wondering about gap years, my experience, my thoughts about it, I thought I'd give a nice little short guide here today. Alrighty, guys. Thank you so much. Have a good one.